Dear students, this is the third and the final set of video from chapter 3 on Indian economy, that is New Economic Policy 1991. I am sure you would have gone for set 1 and set 2. In this third set, we'll cover privatization, globalization, and then the impact of these three aspects on Indian economy. So today we'll start with privatization. Privatization, it means shifting from public sector undertaking to private sector undertaking. For that, government companies are converted into private companies in two ways. Two methods were followed. First, withdrawal of the government from ownership and management of public sector companies. First one, the ownership and the management of the companies which were owned by the government, public sector undertaking, they were handed over to the private sector. And second, by outright sale of public sector companies. And secondly, they were auctioned, they were sold to the private sector. This shifting from public sector undertaking and government keeps reducing its assets is termed as disinvestment. And the purpose of this sale is, according to the government, was mainly to improve financial discipline and facilitate modernization. In those public sector undertakings, once they go in the hands of the private sectors, so their financial disciplines become better and this help in facilitating the modernization. As you can see on your screen, by this way, the government envisaged that privatization could provide strong impetus to the inflow of FDI, that is foreign direct investment. So that too is one of the way that once the public sector undertaking goes in the hands of the private owners, the foreign direct investment also would increase. And some of the PSUs which still remain under government's control still remain public sector undertakings. So they were also given the autonomy. They were given the free rights to have their managerial decisions by their managers. And for that, certain terms government started using to give them the special status, such as Maharatnas, Navaratnas, and Mini Ratnas. So these were the status, the different public sector undertakings who were performing well were given these categories. After that, now we'll come to the globalization, the next aspect, which is most important. Globalization, it means what? That the integration of the Indian economy to the world economy. Okay, but it was a quite complex phenomenon because it's one to many mapping with one country. Now we are trying to deal with the different other countries which have a different market, which have a different mechanism of doing the trade. So for this, it involves creation of network and activities transcending economic, social, and geographical boundaries. So by this way, we just want to expand, right? So economic boundaries, social boundaries, and geographical boundaries you have to cross, and then you have to develop the relationship with the other countries. For this, the most important, it is turning that the world into one whole or creating a borderless world. By this way, the whole economic scenario of the world would become borderless. Trade would become very free and easy flowing. The important decision for this globalization gave the rise to a new term, that is outsourcing. It means what? This is one of the important outcome of the globalization process. In outsourcing, a company hires regular services from external sources, mostly from other countries, which was previously provided internally or from within the country, like legal advice, computer services, advertisement, security, etc. So, this outsourcing means the company which wants to enhance its quality production. Okay, so the kind of services which they earlier were confined to use of their country, now they can hire the best of the best, these companies which can provide these services, these service providers which can help them in achieving the greater heights in their trade. So this outsourcing concept came into existence and it intensified. It actually increased to such a greater extent because of an another support system, that is the fast mode of communication. The internet revolution, the information technology revolution intensified it. It increased it to a larger extent, and that gave the another service into existence which we call the voice based business processing outsourcing, that is BPOs, or normally we call them the call centers. So these call centers gave lot of opportunities to the people to develop the new employment opportunities for the skilled people. So this is a service sector which helps in developing the trade and business in a very faster way, crossing the boundaries of the country. Other than this, record keeping, accountancy, banking services, music recording, film editing, book transcription, clinical advice, or even teaching, these all services were outsourced. And with the help of the modern technology, modern telecommunication like internet, anything can be shared. The text, the voice, the visual data, everything can be digitized and can be transmitted in the real time over the continent and the national boundaries. So now that was not the limit. We started using this satellite technology, GPS system, and then it worked like anything. So this gave an another support to enhance the skill of the manpower. The human being, those who were engaged in the different services, now they had to focus upon improving their skills. And India was quite leading in this service providing sector and could help out the different national and international companies to provide the best of the best services in different sectors. For the support of this trade, another organization which came into existence at that time, which was helping in making this trade more simpler, that was WTO, which we call World Trade Organization. It was founded in 1995, and this organization was the successor of the previously existing organization which was helping in making the trade easier, that was GATE, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. GATE was established in 1948 by the 23 developed countries, and it was established at the time to administer all multilateral trade agreements by providing equal opportunities to the countries who had signed at that time. So now this WTO, in what way it replaced this GATE? The WTO made it a system in which the countries were not having the arbitrary restrictions on trade. Right. So once you have signed the WTO agreement, now you can't restrict, now you can't stop the trade in your country. You can't restrict it. You have to make it actually open for the rest of the countries who are the part of WTO. And the purpose of this was to enlarge the production and trade of services to ensure optimum utilization of the world resources and to protect the environment. So the objective behind the establishment of this WTO was to enhance the productivity of all the countries, to increase the trade so that the resources of the world could be optimally utilized. For this thing, this barriers, the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers were removed. The easy trade movement took place, and as a result, what happened? India turned out, a leading country, representing all the developing countries of the world, right? And it was helping in the supporting the farming sector of India, ठीक है, regulating and safeguarding and advocating the interest of the developing world. So this removed the quantitative restrictions on imports and reduced the tariff rates worldwide. So it helped in making the economy globally vast. In fact, the critics say that the objective of WTO could not be achieved to that extent. They say that WTO was favoring those developed countries more. It was helping in opening the markets of the developing countries for the ready products of the developed countries. On the other hand, the markets of the developed countries were not equally open for the products of the developing countries. The question is of quality. Once your product is not of good quality, it would not be able to maintain, it would not be able to generate a larger market for itself. So it's a question of competition. It was an open competition, right? So that too is one of the way that some developing countries could not compete. So they were forced to improve their quality of producing the different goods and services. Now, the three heads on which we have seen that India had decided to go for LPG economy in 1991, that is liberalized, privatized and globalized economy. The required initiatives had already been taken. Now we'll see finally that what was the impact of these reforms in Indian economy. So we'll finally cover that in Indian economy during reforms and assessment. What was the impact of this thing? So we'll see now that what was its impact. In economics, the growth of an economy is measured by the GDP, the gross domestic product. And we could see from the data that the agricultural sector was showing gradually the decline in GDP. The industrial sector was quite fluctuating, but the service sector was showing the regular growth. That means the maximum contribution in the in making the size of the GDP larger was of service sector. And because of that reason, India could become one of the very important source of providing these services to improve the size of the economy, the size of the GDP. So this LPG economy brought a kind of change in the mindset of the Indian people, and that's why a term which we call the brain drain concept came into existence. The people who were highly skilled, highly educated, highly qualified preferred to migrate from this country, preferred to go out of this country and started working for the other developed nations, started offering their services to them. The opening of the economy has led to a rapid increase in the foreign direct investment, and by this way, lot of investment started coming to this country. Not only foreign direct investment, but foreign institutional investment also took place in India. So, as per the figure, in 1990-91, the FDI in India was about $100 million US dollars, and in 2014-50, it became 73.5 billion US dollars, from 100 million to 73.5 billion dollars. That was the increase in the size of the FDI. In the same way, the foreign exchange reserve, which was only $6 billion in 1991, increased up to 321 US billion dollars in 2014-15. So in this foreign exchange reserve also we could increase. That shows the kind of trade which was taking place from India to the different countries. India has shown a successful increase in the different exporting sectors like auto parts, engineering goods, IT software and textiles during this reform period. Also, the prices came into control, the inflation rate came into control. So, on the other hand, the reform process has been widely criticized for not being able to address some of the basic problems facing our economy, especially in the areas of employment, agriculture, industry, infrastructure development, and fiscal management. So, that too was the side effect that still, once the, because India has one of the biggest problem or one biggest asset, even you can say, that is population, and we require more manpower oriented industries where people could be given the employment. So that too is one of the critic over there, that that kind of employment could not be generated in this country. The kind of infrastructure which was supposed to be developed in this country could not take place, which was existing in the developed countries. Even the agriculture sector, it always has a limitation. Once the economy keeps improving, the share of the agriculture sector always keeps going down. So these were some of the critics which were put over this one. So now the growth and employment was restricted and could not go that way, because they point out that the reform-led growth has not generated sufficient employment opportunities in the country. Right? For this one, what is the main reason? We'll study in the further chapter, which we study in the chapter this poverty, because there is another aspect that why the so-called employment could not be generated with the same ratio in this year. In the case of agriculture, though India is a self-reliant country in the case of agriculture, but it always happens whenever the economy size increases. So what was happening? This agriculture sector is more labor intensive. So in this way also, the public investment in this sector could not be increased to such a great extent as it was required. Also, the kind of subsidies which we removed from this fertilizers and from these pesticides and all, this also created a kind of disparity. Some big farmers could get the bigger share and the small farmers could not get the that much support system to face this international competition too. That too was one of the challenge which agriculture sector remained in front of. And then if we come to the reforms in industry, in a globalized world, developing countries are compelled to open up their economies to greater flow of goods and capitals from developed countries and rendering their industries vulnerable to imported goods. So it was always happening that by this globalization, the Indian markets were open. They had to welcome the products which were coming from the different countries. As we know, presently the markets are really open for all the branded products which are coming from the different countries. And because of that, it was a great competition. It was a great pressure over the domestic manufacturing units, that the kind of support which they required, the kind of investment which is required, the kind of raw materials which are required to produce the quality products at comparatively reasonable price was always a challenge. So these are the pressures on this, okay, on these developed countries. And in fact, the impact was that disinvestment took place in the country because of this globalization. The assets of the government kept going down. The government fixes a target for disinvestment of public sector undertakings every year. So this way the asset of the government keeps going down. The government was able to mobilize 3040 crore more than the target. In 2014-15, the target was about 56,000 crore by this disinvestment. So we find that disinvestment of these public sector undertaking and building social infrastructure in the country could not improve, because they could not improve their efficiency, so now it had to be handed over to the private players. In the fiscal policy, what kind of reforms took place by this LPG economy? The tax reduction was there. The objective of this tax reduction was there, that people disclose their income, the private players disclose their income, and the proper taxes are being paid to the government. Also, for this trade, the taxes which are imposed in the form of this excise duties were also reduced. The reform policy involving tariff reduction have curtailed the scope for raising revenue through custom duties. In order to attract foreign investment, tax incentives were provided to foreign investors, which further reduced the scope for raising tax revenues. So the tax revenue also could not be raised, because ultimately we had to open the market, we had to reduce those tax revenues by which we were collecting from the tariff rates. So finally, if we come to the conclusion, what we can say that this new economic policy, the process of globalization through liberalization and privatization policies, has produced positive as well as negative results both for India and the other countries. Some scholars argue that globalization should be seen as an opportunity in terms of greater access to global markets, high technology, and increased possibility of large industries of developing countries to become important players in the international arena. So now the ball is in our court, ball is in the court of the developing countries. They have an opportunity with pressure, with the competitors. So they need to enhance their quality of their products so that they can enlarge their business up to the international arena. So this all we have covered in this third unit. In what way it helped in making the Indian economy a growing economy, and today we are finding that we are really performing very well. Still, lot of improvement has to be done, but we are well connected, we are well equipped to support our GDP and contributing in making the size of the economy larger and larger. So with this, we have completed this chapter. Make your notes and make yourself through and through by this chapter. Thank you.